Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Today we have a special day. It's Bucky. It's part of our Bucky comprehensivist series, Bucky inspired comprehensivism. And my good friend Struppi is actually going to be walking us through some exercises where this is going to be a very interactive workshop where we actually create some of the structures that we have spoken about in the past. From there, I will turn it over to my good friend Struppi.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Joe, and thank you everyone for showing up. I've also just arrived back home from a little vacation meeting some family, and now the cat is very cuddly. Just out of frame though, so you don't get most of it. But yeah, as Joe has said, I've brought some of my tools and materials that I use to make all kinds of structures that apply the generalized principles of synergetics to create, I speak of animate matter, because these are really living structures. They aren't the kind of things that we are familiar with from Greek geometry, because that is, alas, a little lifeless, when synergetics is actually showing us that the structures of space-time are very much alive, and it's very much fun to play with them and to evoke their presence in one's living environments. Because I am very much certain that, hi Evanik, I am sure that a true grasp, a true understanding of what synergetics is about is something that can be informed to a high degree by reading Synergetics and Amy Edmondson's A Fuller Explanation, and possibly more works besides that, but those two are very good on that. However, while this can inform a sort of intellectual understanding of what this stuff is about, it cannot really provide one with the felt experience of interacting with these structures. So that is really what I have basically dedicated my life to. Since I learned about synergetics, this is what I've been looking for actively in every way that I could, trying to find ways, and preferably simple ways, of creating these structures so that I could actually grasp them and, fathom them and get a felt understanding, a familiarity on a bodily level with these structures and their behaviors. And the good news is that this stuff is really not hard to do, right? So while it is absolutely fine and worthwhile to create, visual representations of these, from graphics to diagrams to perhaps animations, or I don't know, virtual representations in the digital realm. Those things oftentimes need a rather high level of skill with those technologies, and the I've been trying to draw these things, and I'm glad that I can now say that I've come to a place where it's more easy for me to just draw out stuff, by hand, freehand, that actually looks like the stuff that I want it to be, But I'm way far away from something like Casey House's illustrations, right? Those are crisp and clear to a degree that mine, I don't know if they would ever be. But while something like a, virtual reality app that could possibly, I could think of, I could make up in my mind at least how that could help figure out how these things work. It is, on one hand, not really accessible to everyone because of the necessities in terms of equipment and so forth, the privilege of access to technologies and so forth. But it is also falling short of actually giving this hands-on, first-hand experience of these things. While that is true, it is also true that it is absolutely no problem to get supplies like, well, most of the time I'm using beads or straws, but anything goes really. Getting those and turning them into these structures, all that is needed for that is the willingness to do it, the openness to be mistaken all the way until one figures out how it goes, right? Because this is a practice of playing by heart, so it is natural that it is something that doesn't work all the time, but it is the very mistaking that helps one to find the way to do it. And those mistakes are precious because very often they teach us stuff we wouldn't have expected or anticipated. And a lot of the things that I've come up with over time have actually begun as a mistake. I was doing my stuff, getting something on the way, and then I did a mistake and I was like, oh wait, wow, I can do that? Well, if that is possible, then wow, I could have done it this way the whole time. Well, now I'm here, I'm just going to finish this off, but next time I'm going to go with this, right? And then perhaps the next time one does a mistake and that shows a possibility of something like, here's a kind of structure I would never have thought of, and then suddenly it's there. And I like to call this stumbling with grace. And I think that's a very universal quality. That's a quality of being members of universe, is that we are members of this kinship earth and this beautiful non-simultaneous, partially overlapping event conglomerate that is universe. And I think our natural state of being is one where we're graceful. We don't need to be humble all the time because, the birds aren't in the forest. If they were, they would shut up and not sing. But no, they do sing. They sing because it's joyous and it's fun and it's beautiful and it's something that they benefit from and everyone else does too. And I think that's really something we can learn from. And in a similar way as that gracefulness is present in, I would think, most life forms, it's also true that we keep stumbling, and that's fine. It's to learn to walk is to fall until one doesn't or at least doesn't as often. And if you've ever done capoeira, then you know a little bit about falling and getting back up, because that's really, it's a key to a sense of balance that is truly embodied. Because by getting to know the extreme of, oh, I've fallen down, by knowing that well, we don't need to be worried about it anymore because we're at home in that place. And that allows us to move freely through that and not be stuck in there. Because if it's something we keep avoiding, you know, don't make mistakes or something like that. If we keep avoiding that, then we will still eventually make a mistake, but we will not feel comfortable in that place. We won't be familiar with that part of the woods. So all of that is to say that what I want to share with you today is some thoughts. I would love to hear yours as well. And I would like to share with you some of these ways that I found or learned along the way that I consider to be deep technology rather than high tech. This is deep tech. You know, this is coming from a place of deep knowledge of how universe is playing out, what it does, what we do. And on a level before our language, before we learn and we're taught how to think and how to speak and all that, we're already intimately familiar with that because every one of us grew our own bodies, right? It's not something that we've been forced to do or that someone did for us, you know, and then just said, okay, now you're good, here's your body, go out and play. But it's really something we've been doing all our life. And on that level, these principles are playing out at a rate and at a pace that is mind-boggling. Because we've been at this game, at least in the realm of the biological life that we are now, for I don't know how many billion years, you know, many generations. And our smallest members of our bodies, like the cells and the organelles within them, they've been at this for a long time. So they can do it blindfolded and at sleep. You know, they just take all the molecules and then and suddenly there's another one. You know, they just divide it, and this is a division that gives rise to a plurality. It's not a division that makes one superior and another inferior. It's not one that is meant to divide and separate. It's one that is the way that the tree of life keeps branching out. All right. And we're very much capable as humanimals to engage in that game of life, in this play of forms and shapes, also on the level of our everyday experience, you know, in the very, well, the English term for it is concrete, but concrete is not really my kind of material. You know, let's say the real or even corporeal world, that level on which we are manipulators of world. You know, we are able to use our hands to create a great manifold of matter and shapes and sounds and all of these. So this is just to introduce a little the scope of what we're doing, because, you know, on one first glance it may appear to be child's play, and usually that, you know, people say that and it's like, it's just child's play, you know, it's no good. But yeah, I don't subscribe to that, because this kind of child's play is one that is good for all kinds of things, and it is something we should have been doing from early on. All of us, we should just have grown up in a world where this is common sense and not something that we are, you know, I have been looking for this most of my life, and it's only been the last 3 or 4 years now that I've come to know about it. And I can tell that if I had known as a child, I would not have ever done anything else. You know, I would be happily, I don't know where I would be now, probably a little further advanced in these things, but I don't think I would have missed playing with Lego and these kinds of building blocks of civilization if I had known that I could have taken this route instead. So, with that being said, what I have brought are wooden beads. There they go. Wooden beads of various kinds. Like here are some. Here's a bigger one. You know, round beads. I also have such as these, which are more elongated, but still just beads. The same principles that we're going to play with today are applicable to straws and pipes and bamboo and all kinds of things. Essentially, we could also be using something just like branches. However, then we would need a slightly different kind of technique to this one. So the wooden beads or beads in general are one thing. And then of course we need a string, the one that I call umbilical cord when we're stringing these things up. So I've got, for instance, this one. This is a black cotton string. I've also got a white one, perhaps that shows better on the camera, seems to. But really, if you have any, that's good, better than none. But even if you have none, you know, you can take a look, watch, and repeat and take a look again when you do have some materials. And don't worry, because this is not something that you do once and then you got it all. This is really like we're taking a first toe tip, like we put the tip of our toes into the waters to try them out. And perhaps some of us will learn how to swim already with this, because it's really the same kind of pattern from something incredibly simple all the way to the most complex things you could do with beads and string. But it's also something where I can only say that I'm curious to see what every one of you will come up with over time, because this is very much a process, and it's one of tuning. And in this case, you know, tuning can be figuring out over time which beats and which kind of string work well together, right? Because of course you can take any and it will work somehow, but there might be some that work well together, better than just any random ones. So that is already a lot of mouthful. But what I also have brought, because that's generally the kind of toolkit that I use for most of my stuff, is that I have this kind of wire here. It looks like a copper wire, but it's really iron with copper around. But it's a thin wire, that's the important bit. And I've got some cutters for them, and I use these to create very simple loops that I twist the ends, and then I have a kind of a needle that I can put on the end of the string to feed it through the beads more easily. And with some, again, this tuning is also true in that way. Like this is a kind of a hemp line here, and this one is fine, for instance, with these kinds of beads, to just feed through without needle, right? Which makes it easier, even though it won't work all the time. So having something like a needle around is still going to be helpful, but it's not necessary. If you have a good kind of arrangement of tools and materials, you might not actually need needles. However, they're still going to help. They make it easier to do this, and they're also useful for like stringing up straws, for instance, because that's a very long, narrow thing to get a string through. And it's much easier to pull a string through once you've got the needle through, rather than to try to push the string through that, right? But if you don't have the proper or the most finely attuned set of things now, don't worry. You can try it in another turn. Yeah, so that's maybe some words of introduction. And with that, I'd love to just hear from you, and perhaps you can show if you do have some kind of materials at hand, so that we get first like an overview of what we have to play with. Because I'm also hoping that we do have enough variety in the provided supplies, so that even if we're doing the same thing, doing the same pattern, creating what is essentially the same structure, it might still look vastly different depending on what kinds of supplies we've brought to play with, right? So that's something I'd love to see.
So folks, actually go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat to share some of your thoughts about some of the ideas that Struppi has talked about. He's talked about a lot of important things: the importance of play, divide to multiply, and how to create structures, and how these structures relate to some of the Bucky concepts that we've talked about in some of the Synergetics presentations that we've had. So first up, I see we have Jeannie.
Oh, I'm not muted. Well, I wanted to say at first, I'm going back to sort of the beginning of what you were saying. So when we see photography, this is not reality. This is a language that we humans have learned, and you can tell because other animals haven't learned it, many of them, to, identify reality. So a lens can sort of approximate what eyes see, but they don't really. And it's when you see these fancy models on, even Casey House, I hate to say it, but these are algorithms that create an approximation of how we see. They are not reality in any sense. And I wanted to bring up in Joe Clinton's video, which I'm not sure you were there, Struppi, but he showed these pictures side by side. So if you go back to the video and look, he's got his models. There's two pictures of them side by side. And he didn't really exactly explain it, but it's a system of seeing in a bifocal way, which we humans, most of us have two eyes, and we see in a whole different way than a camera. It's hardly even an approximation. So with Joe Clinton's method, you're supposed to line up your eyes with those two models. And, but it would be sort of strange if everybody at the meetup had put their face up to the screen and done it. I was thinking of doing it, but that would have been pretty strange. So, but for those of you that want to go back through it, in the privacy of your own home, put your eyes up next to that. You have to align, your two eyes with the two models, pictures of the models. And then it's a closer approximation to seeing in a 3D way. So, but again, it's just algorithms. It's not reality either. It's the way we see and experience is quite different than what they're doing digitally. But it's a language, and we've all learned it. That's the strange thing. And people will look at a photograph, they'll say, well, that's reality. But it's not, it's just, but we can, show it to a cat, show a fish to a cat, The cat won't care if it's looking at a picture of a fish. It wants to see the real thing, not a picture. So that's pretty much proof that it's a language, not a real thing that we're looking at when we see a photograph.
Yeah, I concur. It's a kind of another game, and as all games, it's as vast as we make it, right? And it comes with its limitations, which is what actually allows the play to happen. But the one thing that is, I feel, almost entirely lacking in what most of us are used to is depth, which is ironic because this is, we can take it to the abstraction and say, well, the problem with Greek geometry is it's superficial. There is no depth to it. It's only surfaces, right? There is like a solid, a platonic solid is not a living structure because it doesn't have any substance to it. And we can also take it to looking at pictures. And while we do have options, as you spoke to the Joe Clinton example with the stereoscopic images that allow for a perception of depth, like it's almost like a virtual approximation of depth perception, it's still not the same thing as actually having, you know, if it's still on a screen or in a book, it's still flat, right? And it's not even 2D because it's flat. There's no two-dimensional reality, nor is there a three-dimensional reality. But it is something that is one of the reasons why I want to share this with you, is because if you look at this on the screen here, it may look one way from one angle and very completely different from another angle, and you may not actually get a hold on what it is. But if you have one in your hand, you're not just looking with your eyes, right? You're looking with your whole being. And I think that's David Abrams speaks to this, that our sensorial being is actual synesthetic in nature, right? Synesthesia is generally considered something like almost like a deficit, or what's the word? Like a pathology, like something where something is off, you know, oh, they smell colors or whatever it is. But really our entire being is synesthetic, because we do have, most of us, 2 eyes, but 1 vision. We have 2 ears and 1 hearing, right? So while the twofoldness on our sensorial side oftentimes has to do with triangulation, if you do think about it, you know, you have 2 eyes, you look at one world, you always have to do with triangles, which is why we have depth perception. The same for the ears and so forth. But it also, it is so that the truth is that we do not perceive separate senses. We sense. And then we think about it, and then that's when we say, oh, I felt that, or I heard that, or, you know, that's when we distinguish within the sensorial experience and say it was that kind of sense and it was that kind of sense. But in the moment of sensing, there is no distinction. It's one being with world, you know, with the universe. And again, this is why this is really, I hope, offering all of us a way of creating these structures close to us, you know, without the intermediate, so that we can actually grasp them with our full sensorial capacity, our full sensorial being. We can see them, hear their sound, feel the texture, taste them if we need to, you know, smell them if they do. There is a lot more to be found there than what meets the eye. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Go ahead, and anybody go ahead, type exclamation point in the chat if you have any comments. But one of the interesting things is that you've brought the 52 living ideas, and it's one of the first things that Evanique and I had actually identified when we were going through our lightning talks, was the idea of spherical thinking. And the way this actually manifests itself in reality is the way we actually we start to play with these things and we start to look at things in different dimensions. But we also look at problems differently and how to solve problems differently. You start to take a spherical thinking approach. You don't necessarily just think of things in one dimension. So when you're playing with these objects, sometimes it just opens up your mind on how you actually look at reality in general. So that's one of the things that play, even playing with magnets, which I don't necessarily create the structures that you do, which are beautiful, but also the ability just to just to see the objects that Bucky's talking about, and then see the objects actually created in Synergetics, and just you start to have a new appreciation for these things. So anyway,
well,
I just wanted to add.
Just as a quick note on that, while you said that what you're doing with the magnets aren't the same kinds of structures, I would actually say they are, because the thing is that the very technique that we're going to look into today with the string and bead allows us to create the exactly the same structures that the magnets do. It's just in one case it's the tensegrity coming out of the magnetic field that gives rise to a structure, and on the other we are replacing that with the tensegrity that comes from the string running through the beads. But it's exactly the same things. The behaviors are identical, except for the fact that the beads won't draw away from one another as the magnets do, because they don't come with polarity. But other than that, and perhaps the time scale, because putting a complex structure together with the magnets takes no time at all, but it just as quickly they disintegrate, whereas it takes a lot longer to string something up, but then they last longer too, and you can really play with them. You don't need to be worried when you play with this that if you squeeze it too hard that it just comes undone. It won't. I mean, perhaps if the string is too thin or something, there's always these possibilities, but then if it does get hurt, it's easy to heal also.
That's beautiful. So next up we have Mona, followed by Eleanor, Evanique, then Mike. Actually, just let me get a quick idea. How long will you need, Struppi, for the actual creation of the structure itself, just so I can watch the timing?
Well, I don't think we're gonna take too long. I mean,
okay.
If I was just what I'm proposing to do today is that we all create at least an 8eyes, because that's something in the middle of the whole thing. So we learn a little more about what the pattern is than just by doing a 4eyes, for instance. It's not as complex as a more complex structure, so it won't take forever. And I think it's feasible for everyone to create these. But it's also very difficult to say this beforehand, because everyone is going to take their own time. And I'm just going to try to get us through this step by step so that no one will be lost for too long, and we can go through this. But I wouldn't think that we take that we'll, like if I do it on my own, it takes me 2 or 3 minutes perhaps, so
okay.
Perhaps
perfect.
Altogether we take a half an hour or something like that, so it's don't worry that it's going to be too much. And actually I would even perhaps, if this is again also a question of how many beads did you bring. In the prompt, I kind of asked you to bring at least a dozen, because that's what we need at minimum to make an 8eyes. But with that, we could also, before we do the 8eyes, we could just make a hex, which is going to show everyone a little more clearly what it is that we're doing before we actually create that structure itself. Yeah.
So thank you for that. And so next up we have Mona.
Thank you. I found some supplies from my art supplies. I found my beads are really, really tiny, but I have the wire and the cutter, But I have a feeling that what you're going to show is scale invariance, so the size won't matter that much. And I really, really wanted to say that I appreciate very much this idea that like I do it with my own hands and I get to feel it, because my sense is that it's not about what I'm making, but it's that I feel compelled to do it. It means that there is something in me that wants to bring this pattern to consciousness. Like I want to become conscious of a pattern that's alive in me. And then it's not so much about what I see or what I make, but my experience of bringing things alive inside. And I appreciate this so much. I can't even begin to tell you like how much. So I'm very, very much looking forward. I'm so glad I found my beads. Thank you.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And you do have enough, so you can.
Oh, I have more. I have
yes,
plenty.
awesome. And if you know, if you do have a wire and small beads, you could also use the wire to string them up. It doesn't need to be a string, so that's fine. And one last thought that just comes from what you say there is the kind of experience that I really want all of us to share today is a hands-on experience of synergy. Because we've been talking about synergy in the course of all of these conversations for a while now, because synergy is at the heart of synergetics, of course. But it is something that very few people have actually experienced consciously, right? I mean, unconsciously, like in our life, there's a lot of synergy all the time. But to create something like these structures where there is that moment of transition when the members, you know, and the more complex, the more members, the members are this tangled mess that is doing and misbehaving in all kinds of funny ways. And then one does one more step and suddenly the thing becomes a whole being in its own. That is a kind of magic that we have in common with everyone that we've been, you know, alienated from, but it's something that I feel all of us should really get to have at least once, if not, you know, every day, because it's something that we absolutely could be weaving into all our lives on all levels, all layers of our realities could come with synergy if we allow them, if we allow the synergy to take place. And that is where all of these many threads intersect, because we do have, you know, the Wu way of the Taoism coming in with the embodied knowledge of all kinds of indigenous people with the wonderful, quirky, Bucky-esque thinking that kind of brings us together. And yeah, I remember on the call with Casey, there was one of you, perhaps it was even one of you who's present today, who shared that experience when they first created something like a dome or so, and that moment when it became one, when it became whole. I mean, it was the same for me. My first geodesic dome was such an incredible experience. And it is that very moment when all the love and perhaps effort in the beginning that we poured into this thing to bring it together, all of a sudden turns it into a living being that takes care of us, you know, that takes hold of our heart. And yeah, to behold that moment is what I would love us to do together today.
Fantastic. So next up, we have Eleanor.
I was just thinking, as Struppi was talking about 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. And then Jenny was saying, I think that for Struppi, there are not 3 dimensions, everything is flat. And I was thinking it's human eyes need to learn how to see 3 dimensions when it's on paper, because I know for a fact that it's difficult for some people to be able to recognize 3-dimensional shapes. And actually our society is fed or is feeding consumers with 3-dimensional pictures, and this is why we are learning to see them. And from the beginning, we can't. We perceive it as abstract structures. So we get told how to see the things, even if it's a pyramid. So we know when we see one more time, we realize, oh, it's a pyramid, or it's a house in a three-dimensional way. There are also books where you can train your eyes to find those three-dimensional pictures or even two-dimensional pictures. It's called hidden pictures. And there are also books where you can learn to see holographic images wearing certain glasses, but wearing the glasses doesn't necessarily warranties you to see three-dimensional holographic pictures, because then you have to find them too and learn how to bring your eyes in a certain position in order to see holographic image. So it's all about physical, technical ability. Your eyes need also your physical ability to perceive. Your eyes have to be healthy, first of all, and be able to distinguish green and red. So if you can even not perceive colors for some reason, some people can't, so it doesn't work again. It's very interesting. So we are trained to do it, but we are not predestined to do it.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
I do agree, and just to make this, perhaps I'm not sure, you know, how many of you have been around when we were in our in the other conversations that I had with you, and I don't even know if I really made this clear in the way that I think it should be. Like it's clear to me, so I often kind of take it as a given, but you know, I do not speak of 0D and 1D and 2D and 3D anymore, because to me, all of these are abstractions that take away from what is real, because what is real is a point, a line, a plane, and a body. But all of these things up to the body are already bodies. It's just that the relationships that we look at between the bodies are the relationship or the aspect of a point, the relationship of a line, the relationship of a plane, which is a triangle, and then the bodies are, are structures where we have these members that are bodies coming together and bodying as a bigger body. So rather than speaking of these shorthands of 3D and so forth, I speak of, linear and planar or flat. 2D is flat. It's not 2D. A piece of paper, a sheet of paper is not two-dimensional, not at all. It's still a full body. It's just a very flat one. And I don't think we need to abstract away from that. In fact, I think if we do, we lose our connection to reality. And it is a very short way from that to having a world where our landscapes are shaped in the image of monoculture, which is one of the outcomes of that kind of abstraction, right? Because if a farmer looks at their field and sees a plain or just an area, they completely ignore the topography or topology, whatever the word is. So they ignore the key lines, they ignore the shape of the land, and then they have no mind for the movement of water and air in that landscape. So they actually oftentimes cause more and more harm on the land than if they were just aware that it is a shape, and they can still think about the area in terms of this is so and so much, but not abstracting away from the shape, right? So I think in synergetics, I've just looked at that bit the other day. Bucky says very clearly, universe is a priori four-dimensional. And I can completely agree with that, because this kind of 4D, four-dimensionality, has to do with the four planes that we find in the foureyes, as I call it, the tetraops. there is 4 perpendicular planes in this, and they show up in all kinds of these structures time and again. And everything that happens with points and lines and so forth happens on the basis of that. Right? So we don't need to take that away to begin thinking about stuff. We can keep that in mind and still speak of a linear relationship and so forth. And this is where Joe spoke to the spherical thinking. This is what I mean by that, is to keep the spheres in mind. You know, this is not taking away from what we've used to do, but it's actually giving us back the entire context. And then we can think in terms of the whole and still point out, here it is a line and so forth. You know, we don't need to reduce it to any less than that and not take it to the extreme of a straight line going off to infinity. You know, that's something no one will ever see anywhere in the universe, because every supposedly straight line is really high frequency like that. It's a twisting thing, and usually it's a part of a very big orbit, right? So it's easy to ignore that big orbit. But if we take it even to the scale of our planet, it's really silly to think that a plane would go on to infinity, because it clearly curves around the globe. And everything we find that is horizontal is within that context. The horizontals of our reality embrace Earth. They do not go off into infinity, never to be seen again. And that's all that we, I think, should be mindful of and bring back into both our language as well as our experience and our relationship with one another.
You know, and this is actually a very important point, because this is where we talk about the connections between the nodes as well. So when you're expanding and you're building, you know, where you're not necessarily just taking away from looking at things in one dimension, you're adding. And so that's where it starts. So you start to look at things from a whole different perspective, and you're keeping the whole in mind. And the interesting thing is that how you talked about it in terms of the planet too. You start to see things from not just your local perspective, but global perspective. And that's an idea. When again, we'll come back to some of the other things you talked about as well. In the opening was one of the important things is about tuning in as well. So, but I want to go to Avanique next.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Struppi. I just wanted to talk about 2 things about what I heard today. The first one is, I love when you talk about when we're playing, we can make mistakes, and I think, you know, in a society that doesn't really allow for it, or, you know, want you to like apologize for it, what was present for me today is that we shouldn't even apologize for a mistake unless it hurts someone. I think, you know, if it hurts someone and it affects another person in a negative way, then yeah, we should apologize for how the mistake hurt. But I think in terms of creativity and, you know, creating views or creating domes or, you know, creating things that benefit a community, I think when we make a mistake and we learn from it, it's great. And like you said, Struppi, earlier, sometimes the mistake makes the thing better, or it makes you see something different. So I like the idea of making a mistake. I think that's how you learn, it's how you grow, and it's how you make things better. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing, we were talking about, you know, when you first created your first dome, and that you had people helping you in that community support. And I think if you look at, you know, all of the different ways that Bucky created domes, that he had help, and that it therefore, I think, built a community. And so for me, it's like when you build a community and you have them help build anything, not just a dome, that really does help. And I know I'm stealing Maritza's thing. She usually talks about community. But I think it really does work here in that, in Bucky's teachings, is that he's not working alone. He's working with people, and that creates community. And I think in a sense, it enhances humanity as a whole. So when we play and when we bring something to the table, even if we're not the best at it or not even good at it, we can bring something. So yeah, Joe, I was thinking about that in CJ, but I was like, I don't know enough to talk about that. So but yeah, I just think it's great. So thank you for bringing this up, and thank you for being here today. It's always good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for all that, really. And just as a thought, two things. First, I don't think you can steal this from Maritza, because this is something that we share. And, you know, there is the good things in life, you know, that the synergetic things in life actually become more the more we share them, right? Like we can take a bit of a plant and just make it another plant, you know, plant it into another piece of soil, and it's gonna grow into its own. And I think, generally speaking, it's always good to tune one's senses to look for these oftentimes very subtle and tiny details in our surroundings that point to these realities, and then concentrate on them and focus in on them. And what was the other thing? I don't even know, but community. Yeah, because you know how Becky always says that life begins with awareness, and no otherness, no awareness. So unity is always plural, and at minimum two. We find that to be true in anything we look at. But I think it's also true in community, right? Because it's a plurality in unity, where it is the communication and the commons and the common sensing that plays a very big and important role in growing these and being and allowing them to be healthy and prosper, not to the detriment and undoing of the web of life, but actually as another layer of that web of life, one where we are consciously attuned to the weaving of this web, so that our life is actually not something that takes away from anyone, but adds to the whole.
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Kurt has actually talked about here is the tragedy of the commons, and how Eleanor Ostrom talks about it in terms of that it's a how people can actually work together and not necessarily to maximize the use of resources. And that's the idea of community. So it's and we've also talked about, as I put in the chat, CJ's essay on mistake mystique as well, and the importance of making mistakes. And this relates to when you're talking about you know, falling down and getting back up. That also speaks to the importance of integrity. You know, the more you fall, you're looking to fall less, and then how integrity actually factors in with that. One's personal and then structural integrity itself. When you're putting these structures together, you're playing. You know, you're actually, you know, you're going to make mistakes. It will not. But that first time where you actually have the geodesic dome and you get there, it's an incredible feeling. For one I don't have yet, but I must admit. But it would be, you know, you keep trying, right? And then you start to understand what it is to go through the process of creating something, and in reality. So not just necessarily talking about it. So I very much appreciate your comments there, Ebony. So we'll go to Mike next, and then, well, we'll see what happens. Mike, go ahead.
The golden ratio appears in the tetrahedron in its analysis. When you combine tetrahedrons and its structures, have you made use of that, or the Fibonacci sequence, or some of that stuff? I know that nature uses the golden ratio and everything from designing seashells to how laser modes and doping end up working. And how does that fit in with some of the things you're doing? And analysis of the properties of the structure once you build it up.
Well, yeah, I do play with it. Like I consider the golden ratio something that I always go to if and when I need to scale something. Like I need a ratio, why not take that? You know, it's a very logical one, and it's one that is always very easily obtained, because it's really something that comes out of the Fibonacci sequence from my point of view, and that is something where the higher one goes, the closer and closer one gets to this ideal golden ratio, which is really an irrational ratio, whatever that is, an irratio. But one of the places where the golden ratio shows up most prominently is in the plane, so to speak, is when I show you this triangle here. Wait,
Yes.
like this. You see this as a 2-frequency triangle, if we only look at that. And if we were to draw a circle around the whole thing that the corners of the triangle lie on, and then we took this line here, this one, and continue it all the way to the circle, then this line and its continuation are in a golden ratio. And this is also true once we take this into the body and we look at this foureyes. Call it tetrahedron if you must, I won't. But we still probably speak of the same thing here. If we take this into the body and we put this foureyes into a sphere, then the continuation of this very line to the point where it touches the sphere, there's going to be a golden ratio too. Well, no, that's, wait, which one is it? That let me think. I've got it there. Yeah. Still, yeah. That's it. Indeed, it's not the continuation of this line, because that would just go. You know, it's just 2 steps to get from one side of the sphere to the other. But from this line of the 8eyes to the side of the sphere, that's a golden ratio. That's not all though, because I've got this thing here. For instance, this is a Fibonacci spiral, but grown out of triangles, of equilateral triangles. So you can see it begins here with the tiny one there. That's a 1 and another 1, and the next one is a 2 frequency, and the next one is 3 frequency, 5, 8, and a dozen and 1, and so forth. And I've also grown this as a structure as a foureyes. So you can take a foureyes and put another one to it, and then have a 2 frequency, and then a 3 frequency, and a 5, and so forth. And it grows into something that looks a lot like a, let's call it an archetypal snail or shell. Of course, it's not identical with anyone that we find out in the real world, because the levels that I'm playing at, you can see this one is all the way up to a dozen and 1, and that's already a lot of beads. You know, and on the level that a shell would be doing it, like a shellfish or something like that, they grow these things on scales that are unattainable to me. You know, I cannot go all that high frequency because I don't have that many beats and don't have that many time. So I'm doing like super low resolution versions of these, and still the the kinship and the similarities are clear. And on a last note on that, I don't know how aware we all are currently, those who are here, but if we are anywhat familiar with synergetic accounting in terms of the volumes of shapes and structures in terms of the quanta, i.e. the foureyes, then let me just get this out of the bag. Not the CAD, you can stay. You can go in the back if you need to. Here, this one. Too many things. So this here is the so-called cube. Yes, it's not solid though. It's not even a construct right now because there's no structure in it. Hence, it doesn't have any integrity. It's a transform and it can do many beautiful things. But if we were to put the structure into it, adding a foureyes in it, then this would be a volume 3 cube. Now that is a significant number, isn't it? 3 is always like 3 is like 4 is like a dozen, is like 2. These numbers are super important and relevant whenever we do find them, right? But I was curious because, you know, why would the cube matter that much? I mean, it's one possible shape we can draw around reality, but it's not really something that shows up as such in reality. And I'm not saying that, you know, a pirate crystal isn't a cubic shape, but that's a super high frequency conglomerate of spheres making that shape. It's all triangulated to be that shape and to be that stable. So, but we don't really need to draw this thing to get anywhere in particular. But where does the number 3 show up otherwise in terms of quanta? And it turns out that there is a very significant shape to my mind that has also a volume 3. And I've shown this in another session. This is an, if you like, it's also an 8eyes. And some of you may recall that this is where we get to the quantum jump. Not necessarily this particular model, because it's not the one that is most tuned to that quantum jump. But if I were to change the orientation of this one line from this to that, and connect these two corners with it, it would become just an 8eyes with a volume 4. But as it is right now, it's volume 3. Why? Because it's 3 foureyes, right? It's a 3 tetra arc, as Bucky called it. We could call it a little boat or maybe a seedling, but it also is the seed, if you like, the seed crystal of the tetrahelix. And I think this is really where the volume 3, with its synergetic or let's say the Fibonacci relevance, kicks in, right? Because one eye less, one foureyes less, and this would just be a 6eyes. So it's these 2 foureyes here, this one and that would be a volume 2. And then we have 1 and 2, and we have 3. And if I do take 2 more foureyes and add them to it, we get a nice little idea of what the tetrahelix looks like. And then with these 2 added to it, we actually get a volume 5 tetrahelix. So like this, now it's a little longer, and it's already beginning to look something like a helix, but it's not yet clear. This is still a bit messy to make out the helix in it. But look, we take a second one and add this to the mix. Put it here. And with that, we get something that is much more clearly a helix, right? Now, is this the only relevance of number 3 and Fibonacci in these things? I don't think so, but it is one that is you know, a base layer significance. It's like a, I think in mathematics they, or in science, they often speak of, what is that called? The principles, first order principles or something like that, you know, like get down to the very basics of it and go from there. But first
You
take a
mean
look at those.
recursion? Recursion, is that what you, what
No,
you're?
it's not, no, but anyways, it doesn't really matter right now, but it's just that, you know, synergetics is a very complex thing, hands down. That's a true statement. Like, we can look at synergetics and find the 31 great circles of the whatever, these kinds of complexities, you know, the A and B modules that make up the whatever, that kind of complexity is fine, you know, it's awesome that we can get that. But it's not really interesting me personally, because before I understand anything about those things, I really first want to understand the simple stuff and really understand it, you know. And then perhaps I see more reason to get into the complexities. But if I do not look at these simple things first and really get to know them to a degree where I know them by heart, yes, then I don't think I'm gonna be really appreciative of the complex things. You know, it's like, first I want to know this stuff, and if it's not sufficient to keep me interested over time, then I still can go into the more complex, deeper waters. But if I just jump in those, I'm just going to drown, and I don't even know what I'm doing then, because what is it good for, you know? And oftentimes I think I would love to just meet Bucky and speak with him, because I would just love to kind of have that conversation and see where we would meet, you know. And perhaps he would get me interested in the more complex stuff that currently I'm a bit ignorant of, right? But on the other hand, I know that he's got a lifetime of looking into this stuff and I haven't. And I am very much open to this process unfolding as it does. And I'm pretty sure that in time I will come to appreciate and understand more deeply what it is that he clearly cared about, you know, the complex things. But I do still believe that it might not be the wisest choice to kind of put too much of the complexities and the details in the foreground too soon, right? Because if people do not understand the simple things first, then they will perhaps get they may intellectually comprehend some of the complexities, but they will not be able to really make use of them. And I think synergetics, if anything, it is a very useful framework, because contrary to the one that we've learned from the Greek, this is one that is, so to speak, hands-on, and it is experiential, and it is truly scientific in a way that the geometry of the Greek isn't. And yeah, anyways, that's a tangent, but perhaps a relevant one.
Very much. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think, yeah, one of the most important things that you were talking about just now is this idea of going back to basics and understanding the basics. And I know for me personally, you know, unity is plural at a minimum too. I mean, understanding that, you can start to build, you know, you start to understand what is otherness.
Yeah.
And then you an awareness, and then from that, what is it that, you know, all the other concepts that fit into Bucky's or that Bucky has put in Synergetics, but it all starts with that for me. And that's one of those, you're coming back to the basics and you're understanding the role of the tetrahedron within that framework. And it's you know, that I think is a very important part of understanding Bucky, because sometimes, and myself included, have, you know, you go through other forms of systems thinking and you just jump right in. And you have to really take your time and, as you said, play. Play with the structures themselves. It's experiment. Experiment. You have to experiment.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's one of the most important things when it comes to really understanding Bucky is not just to take a typical systems thinking approach or one that we've been taught. It's actually one that is demonstrates the importance of play in creating the objects that he talks about. But understanding the basic structures of universe is critical in that framework. So I think that's something that we sometimes I feel like you start talking about Bucky, it's like you're starting out, he's over here, and I forgot to get the basics down sometimes, and it makes things a lot more easy.
Yeah. So this is what we're doing today. We're going to take it to the most basic of levels, because one of the models that Bucky introduces in many of his talks, and certainly in his writings, is what he calls the necklace model. Now, there is a little clip of him that I've put on my YouTube channel out of a conversation with Werner Erhard. If you've seen that one, there's a 1 hour edit of that, which is less than the 7 hours that the complete video is. Well, the 7 hours includes a couple of half-an-hour breaks with just the black screen. Very well edited. But anyways, in that section, Bucky introduces the necklace model, and he actually jumps into the role of a kid. He says, here's this little boy who's playing with his mom's necklace. She's a big woman, so it's a big necklace. And then he goes to demonstrate with a model the behavior of what we're going to do with these beads, but they are taking these wooden dowels with rubber connections, which creates the same kind of thing, but it's a different path to the same. So that is what we're going to do. And I would open this up. Either we just jump right in and try this and take a look, perhaps 1 or 2 looks before we actually do the 8eyes thing as a basis to get there. But perhaps, I don't know if you've actually ever took time on one of these meetups to see a clip of Bucky. Have you?
We have.
Not too often. I mean, I've watched your conversations.
To watch it, but yes, we did. What was it, about a couple months ago? We watched an interview with Bucky. If you remember, and there was one thing that I forget what you highlighted in that, that he had said, it's never too late. It's never too late.
For the truth. Yeah. The interviewer asked him, but don't you think it's too late? Basically, with everything going to shits, isn't it too late already? Kind of, that was in the 70s. It's a bit premature doomsday thing. But looking at the world today, we can still ask and ponder that question. And I think Bucky's answer was absolutely profound, because he said it's never too late for the truth, right? And that's what we're going to take a look into, because this is a level of truth where it is very much important and helpful if we do speak to it. But the truth is speaking for itself, because if we do play with synergetics, we're looking at the actual behavior of the bodies of space-time, and they do speak their own truth. We just have to learn to listen.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's awesome. I think we really ought to come back to that once we go through the exercise. Now,
folks, if you have we begin with that. We can do some of that, and then we take a look at Bucky, just to round it off, perhaps, because I think we've been speaking a long time now already, and we haven't.
Oh no, and yeah, exactly, and that's what we've advertised it as such to that we're going to be creating structures. So, folks, if you have your tools at home, go ahead and get ready. Now, do you want to maybe see if anybody has any specific tools, and then you're going to maybe you'll create objects around something that they have, or would you rather just give a demonstration and just go from there? I think it would be the latter, right?
Yeah, I think I'm still curious, really. I don't think anyone other than Mona has shown their specific kinds of supplies. So I'm still somewhat interested to see what kinds of beads you've brought, if you have some. But at the same time, we can do this so that I do it and you can do it along. But if you don't do this particular bit, we're still going to take the time to really do the weaving bit with the 8eyes, because I really want us all to do that. But this is something that is really like the basics on the way there, and whether you do them along with me or not isn't perhaps as important. So yeah, I would like to perhaps begin just for this occasion with one thing then, which is essentially a short.
Really
Yes.
Maritza was
Yes.
typed exclamation point in the chat. I believe she wants to show something.
Sure.
No, just because you were asking about supplies, I have just the wooden beads. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
I have them in like many different sizes. I'm gonna do these are a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
It's for easier
Awesome.
threading. I have it's like jute.
Yeah.
I don't really like it. It sheds a lot.
Yeah.
But it's
That's
what
a
I
tough
have.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's what I have. So I'm gonna probably and I have a lot of it, but I will
Awesome.
probably look to get some thread later. But this is what I'm playing with today. And I'm going to be using like a knitting needle.
Okay. Try
That's what
it.
I have.
Yeah. So a knitting needle, is that one of those like with like a crochet hook?
And
kind
not
of thing?
quite. No, it's just it looks like a regular needle, it's just bigger
Okay. Yeah.
and it's dull.
All right. And you have one or two of those?
I have many.
Okay. You won't need more than two, but one is okay, but two is better.
I'll grab another one.
Awesome. Cool. But that's cool that you have several sizes, and we can play with that. I think for the first kind of demonstration, this is really, again, something that is very similar to what Bucky is showing in that clip. But I'm just gonna do this as a kind of a preface. And I'll just show you with this string, and I'll take a snap of that, and then I'll take these beautiful long beads that I've got, because I think they make it a little more clear than the spherical ones, this particular point that I'm gonna make. Because I'm gonna show you to begin with just a necklace, right? So I'm gonna take a number of beads, and let's take 6 just for fun. Any more will do the same, any less will do as well, but 6 is always, half a dozen is a good place to begin with. So I simply just string these up real quick. And I'll do one more thing than just stringing them up, because, spherical thinking and synergetics is something that goes in circles and cycles. And this right now is just a line of beads on a string. You see, they move. They're free to do so. But to make this a circle, I could do a knot, but I won't. Rather than doing a knot, I'll take one end of the line and feed that in on the other end of this necklace, where the other end of the line comes out. So we will do this more and more often, and I will keep calling this making ends meet. And what you see now is that I've got one bead that I come out on both sides with the string. It's almost as if I only had one bead on the string. But if I pull on this, you see how it closes that loop and the circle. And even if I pull really tight on it, you will notice that these are still going to be able to move, right? Now they have a lot of tension, like an IKEA shelf where the screws are really tight, so they can move, but they won't do too freely. If I let it a little slack, you'll notice how this just shape shifts all the way, right? So while this could very well, if we drew it on a piece of paper, which is in that case holding the shape, appear to be a hexagon, it turns out it's not, because it's really no shape, no defined shape at all. All right, so that's 6. What happens if we take one out and we keep it with 5? I'll take one out, and now the necklace is open again, so I'll just again make ends meet and feed the beginning of the line into where the other side comes out of. And there we go. And we've got 5 beats, and they're still just as shape-shifty, right? Nothing much has changed in this case. They're still going to be dancing around and transform. Okay, let's do one more. Take one out, and with that we have 4. Again, making ends meet, closing that loop. We'll notice that yet still, even though this would be our familiar uniform idea of a square, if we do have it in that place, it does simply not stay in that shape. I can do what I want with it. It's still gonna drape and shapeshift. It's a transform still. But now something unique is gonna happen, because when we take out one more beat and we take it all the way down to 3, here's 3. I'm closing this loop exactly the same way I did before. Whoop. There. Now watch what happens. Closing this. Oh, I got a triangle there. And for the first time, we actually do have a shape. And this is not shape-shifting anymore. This is still moving, yeah, of course, as one, but it's not transforming anymore. It's not anything else but a triangle. And this is why in synergetics we can identify structure and triangle. Triangle is structure, structure is triangle. It's as simple as that. Now, why is that? That's a good reason, good question. And to make that more clear, I'm going to shift to these models here. This is basically the same. It's a set of 3 straws on a string, and I do have these wooden beads on the end, which have a role to play. But you see how this is just as the 3 strings, the 3 beads on the string, these are still moving. But once I close this circle, this cycle, and the triangle is the easiest, the simplest of circles. Now it's that shape, it's that triangle, right? So it's the exact same behavior. And when I pull on this, you'll see how it still is moving because it's a dynamic structure. It's alive, but it's not changing the basic shape of the triangle anymore. Now let's take a look at why that is. Because if I open this again, and I'll just take hold of 2 of these here, you see how this angle up here where they are joined is free to move, right? There's nothing defining that angle. It's completely undefined and free. And this is really like a universal joint of sorts. And it's a fulcrum as well. And we do have a pair of levers. Or is it levers? I never know. I'll never learn. But if I want to control this angle and I want to do it here in the fulcrum, it's a very tough job, right? But that is essentially what we do when we build a box and put like a glue in the corner, or if it's welded metal, then, you know, we put all the effort into that corner to hold that shape. And in the case of glue or welding, that is introducing microtriangulation. So to see the triangles, we would need a microscope to see on the molecular level how the triangles play out. However, we all know from experience that if I take hold of the other end of the levers, I get all the leverage on my side, you know, and it's the easiest thing in the world to define and control that angle. Nothing, no effort at all. And that is the very place where we introduce the third member here. And this member, Bucky would call it a push-pull member. This one holds on to this angle up here. This one is holding on to that. This one onto that. So it's a self-regenerative system. And while, again, in the geometry that we've been taught in school, we've been made to think of shapes in a plane as polygons, right? There's a triangle and a square and pentagon and hexagon and septagon and whatever gon, n-gons. If we really take them on this level where we don't rely on a body of paper holding on to the drawing and then ignore that, but we actually look at these shapes, these bodies playing, we find that the triangle is the only shape. The square, the pentagon, and the hexagon that we looked at before are no shapes as such. Only when we do introduce triangles into them do they become shapes. So that is a very important thing just to be mindful of, is that the category, as we have learned them, of the polygons is really kind of like almost worse than comparing apples and pears, because we have the triangle as structure, as shape, and then we have shapes that the triangles do, right? And to just put them all into one category and say the only difference between them is the number of sides and the number of corners and so forth is really not, I would say, it's not scientifically sound, because it ignores the very facts that are at play. And this is where Bucky's necklace game, you know, when if we will look at it later, we will see him being absolutely fascinated and enthralled by his discovery as that little boy that he's playing in that moment, finding this shape, this structure that can hold its shape. This little boy has just discovered this shape, and that is something truly remarkable. But again, it looks like child play. It really is child's play, but it's something that we should have all, at one point in our life or another, have had the chance to experience and to behold, and to not be told to ignore it, but to mind it and be informed, instructed by this, because this is what leads us to all the rest of this reality, if we just open our eyes to it. And that's where the triangle, in my language, in my talking, in my words, is an eye, because I can look through it, you know. And if I do take 3 spheres and put them close together, which is the same thing that I've done there. Now these are 3 beads as well on a string, right? It's the same thing, really, exactly the same thing. It's just the shape of the beads is different. But it also goes to show how, in this case, we would probably think of these long beads more in terms of what I would call fingers, and synergetics terms, it's a vector. And this vector is pointing at this corner and that corner. And these corners would be identical to the centers of these spheres. So if I hold them on top one another, it would look like so, right? But these are nuances, right? This is where synergetics allows us to play with this poetically, right? We can put the emphasis here or there, but knowing that it's all the same, right? Whether we focus in on this, if we focus in on the nodes, it's still something that is integral to the relations and vice versa, right? So we can shift freely once we grasp that. But that's enough for the first bit. So I don't know if you've tried, but if you have, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And otherwise, still, I hope you could follow along.
So folks, go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat to share your experience for any of you that may have tried, building some of these structures, and we'll go from there. So Maritza, or is that from last time? I'm sorry, that was from last time.
I can answer. I actually have, I have made one4eyes. I struggle with how the string should be fed. I feel like there's a more efficient way to do it. So I have this one, the 3, but to make it with 4, it's not working for me. Or it works, it's just not pretty.
Yeah, there's intricacies there, and it's a lot easier to have them pointed out and then follow along rather than to have to figure it out all by yourself, which is fine, you can do it. But we don't need to, because we've already got a lot of like a repository of experiences that we can share, the common sense of this. Nice to see.
So next up, we have Mona.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether what I'm doing is because I have very, very tiny beads and they're spherical, but it was very hard for me to notice what you were saying, that with 4 or 6 or 5, they were like flexible, because actually with my like tiny wires, as I pulled it tight, it was really tight. So it wasn't, I was pretty much holding shape, and it wasn't much different than the triangle. Like when I really pulled on, and then it was pretty good.
Yeah.
The hexagon, the pentagon, the square, they were all holding shape.
Yes, because in this case, the wire itself has we can speak of a solidity here, right? Because it's got a crystal structure that a string wouldn't have, because the string has only the fibers running in it, and there is structure in that too, but this structure is of a different quality, so to speak, than having a wire which is crystalline in its way and is much more shapeable, right? We can bend it and it keeps the bend. If I bend the string, if I straighten it out, it won't follow my lead, right? Only if I keep the tension. So of course, this is a good example for the kind of poetry that we find in these patterns, because it does very much matter in which way we embody these patterns, because of course the bodies themselves play a role. And similarly to the differences in whether we take a string or a wire, it also is a difference whether we take a spherical bead or a longer bead, or if we do take spherical beads, we can make them into longer vectors like so by just having a couple of them. But you'll notice how these, while they are still structure and triangles and stuff, they do have a lot more flexibility and malleability than these would have, right? So that's fine. That's why I do enjoy that we do have different materials currently that we're playing with, because we will invariably find variations on these principles and patterns. That's cool.
Anyone else wish to share their experience? Well, if not, we can actually go to some of the other things that we were talking about. I was wondering if we could expand a little bit on triangle structure as triangle when we're putting these shapes together. If you can just expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, okay, I can do. Triangle is structure and structure is triangle is really something that we could also say in a way that triangle is shape and shape is triangle, but that is kind of misleading because there's way more shapes than there is just a triangle. If we speak of structure, it's a different kind of nuance, because we can have structures in all kinds of shapes. But to have something that has a defined shape, something that has structure insofar as it keeps its own shape, we will find time and again that on one level of this shape, of this structure or another, there is triangulation happening, right? And this is where synergetics again differs from the Greek geometry, because we keep the bodies in mind and the Greek didn't. The Greek began their game of geometry saying they have three tools: compass, ruler, or compass, straight edge, and a scribe thing. Essentially a compass, a straight edge, and a pen. And they would only do their geometry with that. But if that was the case, then no geometry would ever come out of it. Because with only these three tools and nobody to draw on, there's no geometry to come out of it. It takes somebody to hold the traces of the lines that we draw, whether that somebody is a body of paper or a body of wood or stone or the earth. It takes somebody to hold onto and remember the traces that we did, the traces of the trajectories of the events that happen when we draw the geometries. So, it is easy to draw out any shape on a piece of paper and have it remain in that shape. It's not probably going to move unless we fold the paper, because the paper itself is a body of fibers that are triangulated, right? So we would need to tune into that subvisible level, the molecular level in that case, to make out the triangles, right? And
that comes back to micro triangulation to a certain
yes,
degree.
exactly.
Right? Okay.
That's them. And the interesting and really important thing is that let me try, maybe I'll show you with this. All the other shapes are things that the triangles do, right? And they also are things that allow the triangles to move, okay? So look at this. Here is a square, right? But it's not really there. It's, again, shape-shifting. Now, if I do take these connections seriously and link them up in triangulation, we quickly get to a place where I have something that resembles the shape of the pyramid here. Right? So this is the archetypal pyramid from Egypt to Mexico to wherever we go. We find this. the so-called square base pyramid, right? Meow. What is the matter?
Mhm.
My cat is meowing. But what the stone-built pyramids do not show is that this is actually still shape-shifting. You see how the presence of the square as really just a void or a gap in between the triangles, in and among the triangles, allows this thing to shapeshift, to move, which is why four-legged like to walk, you know. And have you ever sat on a four-legged chair and noticed how it keeps rocking and walking away? Same with a table or anything with four legs walks around. And it is not that the square isn't doing anything to hold this in shape, right? I can hold on to this on both sides and it seems to be a square, but once I let go of one side, it just collapses, right? And if I wanted to make this just that square, then I would need to put in stuff on the corners, you know, connectors, like the hubs that you find on geodesic domes. And those take the triangulation into a different scale, right? Like if I have a solid metal connector, whatever, then there is a lot of crystalline triangulation at play, which is able to hold the square, even though it's in the least effective place to do so. It's still going to be possibly sufficiently able to do so. But that is, you know, this is still moving, and even if I add another triangle, it's not yet gotten to a place which Bucky would speak of as omni-triangulation, right? Even still with one more connection, you see this is still moving because this opening here is still quadrilateral. Yeah, there's no defined shape here, and only by adding the last link here do we get a state of omni-triangulation, which is a shape as such, able to not only hold its own shape, but even carry load, right? And this is still the same floppy dynamic thing. It's just by means of triangulation, all of these members are now in a place where they can synergize, they can work, play together, and hang together in compendence, being able to not only hold their own weight, but even more so. You know, you could add a lot of weight onto this. I've actually once done an experiment where I took one of these structures. This one has wooden dowels inside the straws, so they are a little more strong. The other one on the video, I only took the wooden, the paper straws, and I put a board on them and then a bucket, and I filled the bucket with water. And it was not before it was 7 liters of water, which is about 7 kilos, that the straws collapsed. That's paper straws, mind you, 7 kilos just on paper straws and string. If I had the wooden dowels in it, it would probably have a dozen kilos or more, right? And that is where we are missing out. We're missing out on the good life and the simple life and the easy life and the effortless being in tune with the universe if we are not aware of the nature of the triangle and the, well, triangle of nature, of the integrity and identity of structure and triangle.
Yeah, you know, this is one of the things here is that I really think that this adds quite a bit to this particular meetup, what we're doing here today, because, you know, in the spirit of comprehensivism, that this is actually hands-on, where everybody's, you know, come here and presented on various topics. But this hands-on experience is really actually allows you to appreciate things like tensegrity much more. And just seeing this demonstration that you just provided really actually is, it's very helpful. But even then, I think as we work through the exercises, I'm really excited about how this meetup is starting, because I think that this is going to bring things to another level, in the sense of our understanding of Bucky. So yeah, I mean, this has been fantastic. I'm excited actually about getting started with this, and looking forward to moving on with it. But it's yeah, I mean, do you have anything to add? You would like to add to that?
Well, there's always more to say about it, I guess. But I don't want to overcomplicate things. And I think this was just like a narrowing in, like a tuning into where something as trivial and simple as a necklace can teach us some of the most profound insights on the structuring of universe, right? Something where, again, we don't need any, what are they called? The CERN and these things, these gigantic high-tech technology things where we smash molecules or atoms into one another to break them all, to find the building block, well, that's fine. Do that if you need to, but look, mind this too, right? And take a moment to just do it for yourself. If not now, do it on your own time, but really do it for yourself, because that is where Bucky's invitation to dare to be naive really rings true. Because what he says there is, do not just take what is presented on face value and on the authority of the presenter or the book that they read from, but go do your own thinking. And that is a practice. That is, go take your hands and hold on to things and bring them together and see what comes out of them. And check this, don't take my word on this. Go do it yourself, because your hands are gonna help you not only gain an understanding, but possibly an inner standing of what is going on. So, by the way, I think Melody has come in, and I just want to acknowledge that and say hi, Melody. It's good to have you with us. Hi there. Here's another fellow cohort from the Design Science Studio. How are you?
Hello everyone, it is really wonderful. When I see Struppi just 10 minutes ago, so I jumped in, and yeah, I'm in the same road with Struppi, with the sacred geometry and also synergetic structures. So I would love to be here. Yeah,
good to have you. Well, and then now that we've got that out of the way, let's get it on. And rather than doing another preliminary thing, which I think would be nice, but maybe we do it actually after the eighteyes, just so we get to that and have it. Let's do that. Let's make an eighteyes. And for those of you who do perhaps need a needle, that's what we do first. We create 2 of those. If you do have needles already and you don't need to do this, all the better. But I'll show you how I do them. I'll take a bit of the wire here. You can, I hope you see that, it's very thin. I'll just take a piece of that. If I was to tie up, yeah, Mona, it's good to have had you here. If I do, for instance, want to tie up straws, then the length of the wire that I take is a little more than twice the length of the straw, right? Because I want to be able to feed it through, but I don't just need this piece of wire, as flimsy as it is, but I want to make it into a loop. So I fold it in half, And then I'll take another bit of a tweezer here, and I'll hold on to the end, and I'll actually twist the ends together a number of times. I'll try to get these as neatly and tightly twisted as I can. If they do open up over time, which can happen, don't worry, just twist them again. And if they break, they're going to become a little shorter, but that's still fine. Right now I have a loop here. And on one end of the loop, there's the twist. And I'll just pull along this so that the tip of it gets a little more neat. And then I'll make just a second one of those. Because while it is very much possible to string the more simple of these structures with just one end of the line, following some path, that is both more complicated than going with both ends and less versatile, because if we do learn this pattern with going with both ends of the string, we can use it to create any of the structures, right? That's, I think, a little more useful then. So I'll take a second piece of the wire, and I'll repeat my procedure here, and I'll see if I can get this up to the camera a little better so you can actually see what I'm doing. I've got my wire, I fold it in half, grab the two ends and twist them together. Which, if you've ever seen a piece of rope, you may notice that this looks a lot like it. And if we were to, we could take a whole conversation into the synergy and synergetics of ropes and knotwork. There's a lot there. Now I have my twisted end on the one side. I'll take the round end of the loop and just straighten it out a little. And with that, I have two wonderful DIY, self-made needles, and I still have a whole lot of the wire in case I need it. If I lose my needles or something, which happens, it's no problem. So now I got these two. I'll put them down so that I don't lose them. And I take string. And usually when I'm doing things, I'd rather have a little more string than too little. You know, if we were to make it with the least string necessary, then generally speaking, for something where we're doing only a membrane, we'd need twice the length. How do I say this? So an 8eyes, this is an 8eyes, has 12 fingers, 12 vectors. And the string is running through all of them doubled. So 2 passes for each vector. So the overall length of the string at minimum would be not 12 times or a dozen times the length of one of these straws, but actually 24 times, 24 times the length of this, plus let's say one more just to have some to play with and to make knots in. Now that is not necessary that you go ahead and measure that now, because we can just take, I would say, like, let's take a fathom, which is one, fathom is actually, in German we call this measure Faden, which is the same word as thread. So one fathom is the length of our embrace, right? If we fathom something where we can wrap our minds around something. We'll take that much for now. That should be enough for the kinds of beats that I saw you play with. And I'll just snap that off. If you do have string that you can't snap, then take a scissor or something and cut it off. Now I've got my two ends of my line. And I'll take my needle here. I'll open it up a little. so that I can put the string through into the loop, and I will place it on the twisted end of the needle. And if all things go well, it's actually gonna get gripped a little bit in there, because the twist opens up a little angle there, so basically a triangle, and the string can get locked in there. I will do the same with the other end of the line. So I open up my other needle ever so slightly, feed my string through that, there, make it sit in the twisted end of the string. Right, so now we have our fathom with our 2 needles. Is that cool? I'll give you a moment to get sorted out. Maritza is there. Jeannie, how is it? You good? Okay. Well, all the others I don't see, so please just let's do it this way. If there is any one of you who needs a little more time, just put one of those exclamation marks in the chat so that we are aware of that, and then we can take a moment to have you figure it out. But other than that, I'll just continue in my pace, mindfully trying to keep you all along. Okay, now we've got our string, which is now going to turn into what I call the umbilical cord when we put it into the beads. And to begin with, let's just take a single bead and put it on, just to see that it's working. And I'll place that somewhere around the halfway point of my string. So that is bead 1, okay? Not square 1, but bead 1. And what we find is that our string is coming out of both sides of this bead, okay? Now, if you do have sufficiently many beads and you feel adventurous, is that the word? You can put, let's say, 2 or even 3 beads for every vector, or let's say finger, okay? So this is now for me the first finger, and it's only a single bead. If we were to, we could also have 2 or 3 for that. And if one of you perhaps was doing that, just think of when I say finger, you always have that number of beads, 2 or 3, in place of where I just put 1. And awesome, Maritza is going to take 2, that's great. Okay, but still, if you consider that as one finger, on both ends of the finger, there's a string coming out, right? That's still the same. Awesome. Cool, let's add 2 more fingers. So I'm gonna add 2 more beads. Maritza is gonna take 4. So here's 1 and 2. Up. Just to check, I've got 3 beads on my string. And you've got 6. Awesome. Now you may recall how earlier we were tying our circle, where I said we're making ends meet. So I'll take one end of my string and I'll feed it into the other end. So where the other end of the line comes out, I'll go in, and I'll go in through 1 finger. So in my case, I'll go through 1 bead. Maritza will go through 2. And then I'll pull the line through, and you see this is now a loop, a circle. And a good sign for having something that is a whole thing is that if you pull on it, it closes, right? So this is going to close into a triangle, right? And now let's see what it looks like with Maritza. Okay, you've not fed it into the other end of where the string comes out, but just the other end of that last finger. Okay, so you go all the way around, put it in where the other end of the line comes out. And I may just to put this out in the beginning, sometimes when I'm explaining this, I'm just speaking of the one string and the other string, which is a little easier, but mind you, it's the same string, it's both ends of it, right? Just we don't get confused on that. And again, if someone needs more time for this, we'll have that time. Just let us know. So Maritza is there, and now you can pull it. And you see it closes. And this is still a triangle. It looks like a hexagon. But if you consider every pair of beads on that as one finger, as a unit, then you've got 3 fingers, right? And that's going to be more clear in time as we grow more of them. Okay. And you know what? I might actually accompany this growing with one with the long beads, where I do the same exact thing, but have long beads, because I think it's going to be more clear to show what is going on. So I'll just take another end of line here, another length of line. Ooh, I hope that's long enough. That's always my problem. Every time I cut something off, I think it's too short, but then it's just enough. Who knows? Maybe I'll learn someday. So I'll just catch up with what we have done. I'll put 3 beads on this string. 1, 2, and 3. And then I'll feed this end of the line into the other end of the thing where the other end of the line comes out. Whoop. There. And once I pull that through, now I've got my triangle, right? And this is it's exactly the same as this. It's just the shape of the beads that is different. Okay? Now, I'll take this one to explain what we do next. We look at this and we consider the finger that we're coming out of. This is right now, again, like our bead number 1. Right? We're basically, it's like coming out of one bead with the string, and we don't actually need to think of the rest of the structure that we've grown to note that. This is coming out of that one. And this finger is pointing with the 2 ends where the string comes out at these 2 corners. Yeah? And right now it's balanced because both these corners have each 2 fingers pointing at them. Is that okay? Is that clear? Cool. So in a balanced moment, it doesn't really matter where we add our next beads to, because it's a symmetric thing. So we just pick one of the lines, one of the ends, and we are going to add 2 fingers to that. Okay? So for those of us who have 1 bead for every finger, that's 2 beads. For those of us like Maritza who have 2 beads for every finger, that is 4 beads. Okay? Yeah, like that. Okay, now we see we basically have 3 beads on the string, if we think of it that way. And now we'll take the other end of the line, not the one that we added the two, but the other end, make ends meet, and put that end in where the other comes out. Okay, so I'll demonstrate like this. I'll put this in here, okay? And just after that, I'll do the same with the other one that I'm doing simultaneously. But before, I'll draw this line through, and as I do that, the second eye is closing. Or is it opening? I'm not sure. We now have two eyes, a pair of eyes. Okay, and I'll just catch up on this one. So this one is still only one triangle. It's symmetric, so I'll add two beads or two fingers to one end of it. 1 and 2. So now it looks like this. Okay, and I'll take the other end of the line, this one, and go in to the last finger where the other string comes out, and only one finger, not both. And drawing on it, now I closed a second eye. And the pair of eyes looks a little bit funny here because it's a sub-frequency finger, but we don't need to go too deep into that. Okay, so that is, again, we're at the same exact place with both of these, but they look vastly different. But look at Maritza's there, and you'll see you still have two eyes, right? You have a pair of eyes. So now that we have that, you want to say something?
Nope, I was just coming off the, so it would show on the screen.
Yes. Yes. Now, if you look at what you have in front of you there, you'll notice that the one finger that we're coming out of right now is still pointing two ways at two corners, right? But now there is an imbalance, right? One corner is what I would call heavy, and the other is light, right? The heavy corner currently has 3 fingers pointing at it, this one, whereas the light corner, this one, has only 2 fingers pointing at it. Okay? Now think of this heavy corner as the inside, and the other is the outside, and we're turning. Basically, we're almost like a compass on the paper. And the heavy side is where the compass is plugged into the paper, and the light side is like the playing leg that goes around in a circle. Okay? So this is where we have the freedom of deciding what kind of a structure we want to do. Because in my kind of thinking, the way that I understand it, the kind of structure that we're growing has primarily to do with how many fingers are pointing at any given corner. Okay, I hope that's clear. So if I do make a 4 eyes like this, you see this corner here has 3 fingers pointing at it. Yes? If I have an 8 eyes like this one, you see the corner has 4 fingers. Now if I had a 2,008 eyes like this one, oh, this is heavy because it's full of magnets. You see in the corner here, oh, there's 5 fingers. Okay, so that's what differentiates them, the numbers of fingers pointing at a corner. So we have decided beforehand that we were going to make an 8 eyes. And those of you who've been carefully listening could be able to tell me how many fingers we have for that. For those who haven't, let's take a look again. Here is our 8eyes, and the corner has 4 fingers pointing at it. So we look at our structure that we're growing, look at the heavy side, because that's the one we're turning around. How many fingers is there? 3, indeed. So is that 4? No. 1 more, okay? We need 1 more finger. And to get it, we repeat the last step we did. We're going to add 2 fingers. But since we're not in a balanced place anymore, it matters where we add them. And to do this the way that we're doing it now, this is not to say it's the only way, there's endless ways, but this is one way that works, so we're going to stick with it for now. We are adding our 2 new fingers to the outside string, to the light side, where we only have 2 fingers, okay? So you take that end of the line, and you'll add 2 more fingers to that. Okay, I'm going to do that. And that looks similar to before, like this. Yes. Okay. I'm gonna wait for Jeannie. Up. And perhaps in the meantime, I can add the 2 to my other structure, because why not? So I'll add 2 fingers to that. Whoop, whoop. And that looks like this. It's the same thing. Looks different, but it's the same thing. Jeannie, how's it going? Is that a nod of yes, you're there or not? Okay, then we'll take the other end of the line. Yes, nice. And again, we'll make ends meet and put this end of the line in to that last finger where the other end of the line comes out. And we pull that through. There. Oh, yes, perfect. That's how it looks on this one. Yeah, Jeannie, you might want to flatten it out a little. It looks a little tangled. Maritza looks good. This one looks also good. I'm gonna do the same with this one just to keep up. So I'm here, right? And I'll make ends meet and feed the end of the line in where the other comes out through that last finger. Whoop, there. Pulling on it, I close it, and I got my 3 eyes. Yeah, and you notice on my beads, because they have this particular beautiful shape, this actually looks like a half of a hexagon, right? And with that, you may notice that if we were to continue, we would indeed be growing a hexagon. I've got one here, so I can show you, right? So if I wanted to make a different shape, not the 8eyes, but for instance, the dozen 8eyes where I have 5 fingers, I would add 1 more. So I get 5 pointing at that corner. If I have 6, that's a neutral corner. And you'll see, for instance, on something like this is a more complex structure. While the corners that define the shape overall have 3 fingers, all the other corners that we find, or vertices that we find around the membrane here, turn out to have 6 fingers that meet there. This one has 6, that has 6. So while, again, Greek geometry makes us think that a hexagon is a hexagon is a hexagon, a real hexagon is actually not necessarily a plane, but it can actually fold, right? So it can wrap around the sides of structures and so forth. It's a neutral configuration. Okay, that's that. So now we've come out of that movement and we're here. Yes, we've got our, by now, 3 eyes. And again, we ask ourselves, we're coming out of this finger on both sides of it, and it's pointing at the 2 corners here. And we'll look again at these 2 corners and find out one of them has 2 fingers. That's still a light side. The other has by now 4 fingers. Do you agree? Yes. Maritza has 4. Jeannie, how about you? You're not quite sure because it looks different. Look at this one. Does it look like this? You may have a bit of a slack in there. Can you put it in the camera once more and hold it for a moment so I can diagnose? No. What are you saying? You're muted, you know that. Still figuring it out. Does it look like
I'm
this?
good. I'm good.
Okay. Okay. Now, in this case, I've got the one side of the finger here pointing at this. There's 2 fingers, right side, and this corner has 1, 2, 3, 4 fingers. So that's my heavy side. And again, since we want to make 8 eyes, 4 fingers is what we need. So we've got them now. So what do we do now? Well, we do close off this corner. And if I say that, what I mean is I'll take the inside string, the one on the heavy side, and I'll get it out of that corner through the opposite side of the corner. So this one. And opposite is really, really, truly meaning that if I went all the way around this thing, this is basically the first finger again. And I'll take my inside string here and here. I'll put it through this bead, coming from the inside, going to the outside. Like that. And just for reasons of clarity, I'll do the same with this one. I'm here. I think I was holding it that way around. So I've got my 2 fingers here. I've got the 4 on this side, and I'll take my inside string, this one, and get it out of the corner through this finger. So I'll take it from the inside and wiggle that through. This might be easier if I put beeswax on it, but it's okay. There it is. And I'll pull that, and it looks like this. Okay. Maritza, can you show once more? I think that's fine. Just can you pull them apart a little bit so that they don't wrinkle? Okay, maybe you need to take that last step back because it may have been a mistaken step. But this is really, it would be a lot easier if we were in one room and I could just look at your fingers. But we'll make do. Okay, you're there. Okay. You take that string, yes, that one. And there, yes, out there, through both of those beads. Okay. Yes, that's it. And now the keen observers among you will notice that we're in a very different state now, because we don't just have one bead or one finger that is on the string as I would call currently active, but we actually have 2, right? And whenever we have 2, it's like this. It's this, and we just need 1 more finger to make it a triangle, okay? And it doesn't matter where, on which side of the string you put it, because both ends of the string go through it, right? Just pick one end, put 1 more finger on it, and then take the other end and go through that same finger the other way around. So again, making ends meet, you put this thread in, the line in, where the other line end comes out. And if everything goes well, I draw it and it closes. And it looks like this. You take that end on your, is that the other end? The one on the bottom? Yes, that one. And you put it into where the other end comes out, through that finger. Okay, I'll just catch up on this one. I'm still on the 2 beads here, like this, and I'll add 1 as a bridge. Oh yes, Maritza just has got her pyramid going. Hooray! Okay, I'll add 1 bead to this one side of it, up, don't lose it, and I'll take the other end of the line and go the other way around, making ends meet. I'll put this in where the other end comes out. There. Whoop. And now I'm again drawing it, and I'm closing 1 more eye. Here. Yes. And you can see how much more similar this looks to the one that Maritza is doing than, say, this one, which is really, in terms of shapes, should be closer to Maritza's, but it looks very different because we have the curious case where the vectors are spheres. And that's a kind of a duality that we can talk about in detail at another point. Okay. Everyone still with us? Jeannie? Huh? Not clear? Joe, how are you doing?
Just following along right now. So it's kind of it's a regret
You're
not
weaving
getting
in
these
them all.
beads. Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I drew a few of these things out.
Yeah. That's okay. I'll wait for a moment longer for Jeannie, just to be sure to get a positive on your side. While I'm waiting, those who may have now already gotten this, take a look at the 2 corners that your finger is pointing at. Here, Jeannie, this is what it looks like from one side, and that's what it looks like from the other. Here. You look at the 2 corners that you're coming out to with the string, and counting the fingers that are pointing at these 2 corners. What do we find? How many do we find? Put them in the chat if you do want to. Curious to see what you come up with. Maritza, you look puzzled. Are you?
I'm doubting my math skills. I'm only seeing 3.
Yes.
I'm supposed to be seeing 3. Okay.
Hopefully. Both of the corners should now have 3 fingers pointing at them. Yes? So with that, we notice that, again, we're at a balanced place, right? It's symmetric. So symmetrical, whatever. So it, on this point, again, we're free to add on either of the two ends of the line because it's a symmetrical step. It doesn't matter which way. It just defines the direction that we're turning into. But that is it's always 1 out of 2, and it's the same one if we turn it inside out. So left and right is the same thing, just inside out. Okay, so I'll just pick one of my ends, and I'll do the same as I did all the time before. I'm gonna add 2 fingers on one end of the string, and then I'll make ends meet and get the other end of the string. Right now it looks like this. Yes, and I'll take the other end of the line, make ends meet, and put this into where the other string comes out, and through that one finger. And pulling on it, I'm closing one more eye. Perfect. Okay, I'll catch up with the other one here quickly. We're still in that place, symmetric step. I'll add 2 beads, 2 fingers on one end. 1 and 2. And then it looks like this. So I'll take the other end of the line and make ends meet. Put it in through that last finger and pull on it, and if all things go well, it closes into yet another eye. Jeannie, if you're so quick, I don't see what you're doing. You're in and out of frame in a blink of an eye. Whoop, now you're gone all the way. That was not the mute button, that was the camera. Okay, can you hold it for a moment so that I can, please?
No,
just,
I can't hold it up.
Just hold it up for a moment so that I can.
It's too heavy, sorry.
Is that stone beads you got? They look like tiger's eye, are they?
Yeah.
Ah, I've got some of those here. Also the same kind of size. Those are super nice and super heavy. Here, like these.
Nice.
Oh. Okay. Well, then I'll just hope that you're still at the same place as we are. And again, we're basically asking ourselves the same question as all the times before. We're coming out of one finger. It's pointing at 2 corners, and we're looking at the numbers of fingers that those 2 corners have. One of them should be 2 fingers. And that's the light side again. Yes, that one. And the other one, how many fingers does it have? 4. Yes. Is that the number we're looking for? Yes. Okay, so we've got all. We can close that corner right away. Do you recall how to close the corner? We'll take the inside string, that's the heavy side, and we'll feed it. Now this is going to be funny. I'm going to try to show it with this one. I think it's more clear, hopefully. This is where I'm at. Right? So I've got my little pyramid and a little triangle added to it. And I'm coming out of this bead. And one side of it, one corner has 2 fingers, and the other has 1, 2, 3, 4 fingers. So I'll close that corner, and by doing this, I'm taking the inside string on the heavy side, and I'm going to put fingers of the pyramid, right? So I'll put this in here, like so. And it looks like this. I'm gonna get a little closer to the camera because my neck starts hurting from holding this up. I'm too far away. Okay, is that generally speaking what it looks like on your end? Not at all, says Maritza. Where are you at?
I'm not certain which one is the opposite end. So this is the heavy side.
Which one would you think? Yes.
I would put it in
Yes.
these here, these two.
No, those aren't part of that corner.
Oh, why not? They're on that side. Oh, is it back? Oh, I'm looking there. I have to look at
You're
the
looking at the corner where the string
I'm
comes
looking the wrong
out.
side. Is it here then?
No, that's also not part of the corner that you're at.
Okay, did I see? I'm all kinds of, okay, so let me start again. So this
Is that
side
your
here,
right hand? Is that your right hand with the dark color
dark
wristband?
is no, that's right hand, yes.
That's okay. So on that side, you're on that side. You can make out the 4 fingers that are pointing at this corner, yes?
1, 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, where's 4? Right, now I'm confused.
Coming out of 4.
2, 3. No, it's 4 this way. Right? Those 4.
Those are already done.
I'm all confused then.
You're looking at
Oh,
the
it's here.
corner
1, 2,
that you're
3, 4.
coming
Okay.
out.
All right, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
okay. Now, can you see which one is the opposite finger?
It's not this one? No. I'm confused.
In the same corner. It's one of the 4 fingers pointing at that corner. You will find, if you look closely at the corner, there is 3 strings, tiny bits of string that you can see jumping from one finger to the next in the corner. Is that so?
It's this one.
Nope.
No, I'm not following them. So if
Let
I'm counting,
me ask.
It's that one. Nope. Point at the one that is yes, that one.
that's the
This
furthest one?
Yes, you go in there. Yes.
Okay, so
I don't
It's a
understand.
bit confusing right now because your triangle is turned outside, like so. If you
Oh, okay,
put it
okay.
inwards, that
I
maybe it's a little more clear.
I
Okay.
got you. Okay.
Struppi, let me ask. So I see a pyramid shape, from the heavy corner, and it has 4
Yes.
beats.
Yes.
But when you say
Mhm.
opposite, so is it? I mean, there's 4 beads there. Which one is opposite of everything? Like way opposite. So
It's
skip a
not really
bead.
opposite of everything. Let's say it differently. I'll repeat this one step just for showing. This is where I am at, okay? I'm coming out of this finger, this one. And on my heavy side, it's these 1, 2, 3, 4 beats. And if I look closely at that corner, I'll see connections that the string is already making between those 3 fingers or 4 fingers. But there's only 3 connections in place. There's a 4th one missing, and that's the one we're tying now. So the one that's missing is the one that we need to put in now. Is that clear? Does that help?
I did it wrong.
Did you?
I think so, because I should
If
see.
you did, just take it.
Yeah, I'm gonna
If you do
unback,
mistake,
undo.
yeah, just take that last one back.
Well, let me go ahead a little bit. Is this
Okay.
the last closing? So there's only one place to do it, or are we then gonna string it through other places after that?
There's still
What did I
some
do?
more corners to do.
Oh, okay. So we got to go through all 4 of the corners of the pyramid.
Well, not all at once. We'll just concern ourselves with the one corner right now that we're at.
Which is
Okay.
the closest corner.
And
Is it the closest?
the
to-
closest one, yes.
Oh, okay.
I think I just undid the wrong
And
side.
if we look at this, if we look at the pyramid shape, like if I set down the pyramid on my hand like this, okay, perhaps that helps. Yeah, I think it will. You see, this is the bead that I'm coming out of. This is the heavy corner, the one of the pyramid. And the 3 fingers that are here in the pyramid, they are already connected. And this one is also connected to the one here. What is missing is the connection from this finger here, this one to this one.
Let me ask this. Are all the beads on now? Or are there more beads coming on? Is this?
There's still more beads coming.
There are.
I
Yeah.
I undid the wrong
Yeah,
side.
you've got
Issues. That's what I have.
it's all good. You've just now done, rather than putting 2 fingers on one end of the line, you've put 1 finger on one end and 1 on the other. Okay, that's not a problem. It's not the way we are doing it currently, but it's the same thing in essence. You just take now one of the 2 ends and feed it through that 1 finger on the other end. Okay?
This
Is
one
that okay?
right
Just
here.
pick one of the lines.
Yeah.
Yes. No. On just the 2 fingers that are on the string dangling free right now. You've got 2 of those.
Yes.
Right? You've got one on this side and one on the other.
I do.
You just make that 1 loop. Okay?
Oh, both of them. Okay, tie them together.
Just take, yeah.
Got it.
Okay, this is the bit where it gets more and more complex, but more confusing. Yes.
Okay,
So more
now I'm back
confusing
here.
is more chances to there. Okay, so I'm gonna show you this, what I did right now with showing this. I put the pyramid on my hand, you see, like so. And then I've got the little extra triangle here that I'm coming out of this finger.
Okay.
And now I'll take the heavy line, this one, and I'll put it into this finger, which is
Oh, okay.
the next one of the base of the pyramid. Okay? And I put it in on that very corner.
And for me, it's this one.
My melody.
See you.
Show
Bye bye. Do you want?
Oh, she's passing this.
Oh,
Nice.
you made one of those. Nice.
It was really
That's
a
a
great
dozen and
pleasure.
eighteyes.
Yes. So thank you for the water.
Awesome.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Okay, you good? So this is exactly why I opened this entire workshop stating that it's crucial to make mistakes
Yes.
and not to worry about them too much. The worst thing is that can happen is a total mess and tangle, and then we just have to disentangle it back to a place where we know where we are and go from there. Well, I'll just go ahead and do this. I'll put my string into that base finger of that pyramid. And when I've done that, I should again be in a place where I have 2 active beads. So I've been showing this in this moment. We're closing off this corner. We're in these 2 fingers, and we're gonna add 1 to bridge them. Is that so? In that action? Like so? Yes, yes, that's fine. Yes, it is. It looks weird, but that's because the triangle is turned, the flap is outside. It's gonna turn inwards. But that's what we do next, because we add 1 more finger that bridges that gap, okay? So you just add 1 finger to one side of the line and then take the other end of the line, make ends meet, and go back through that finger the other way around. And you'll notice that I'm basically speaking something that I suppose we could call an algorithm, right? It's like I'm coming out of 1 beat, I'm looking at the 2 corners, I'm orienting myself, and then I'm at the other end of the line that you have not added the finger to, and that finger where the other line comes out. Nope, not that. No, 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 Maritza, not that one. No, Maritza, no. Ah, oh yes, maybe. Show me again. Maybe I was mistaken. Can you move it a little? Aha, not that one. Can you take that one back? The last step you did? Because this is a crucial thing. I keep saying that we have the inside and the outside of things. And what you've done now is that you've jumped back on the inside, basically. You're on one of the inside fingers. And it's very hard to get out of that. So rather than that, we always try to keep on the outside of things. Did you take out the other end? Show me slowly and patiently. So I've got a moment to understand where you are. Can you put it a little higher up so I can see it? There. Okay, one end is coming out of that. Where's the other end? So just put the one in your right hand. That one. Put that in where the other comes out. And then once you've done that, you take the other one and pull it back through. This is remote little confusing at times, but it's good. Who may find this too confusing currently, because I'm trying to help you I'm trying to do this live. In the meetup description,
I don't, Struppi, I think you're breaking up a bit, unless it's me.
I'm not hearing Struppi either anymore.
oh, am I?
Struppi, yeah, your
Yeah.
We lost you.
internet's,
Perhaps my connection isn't on. Have you both lost me? All of you?
I can hear you choppy.
Take this then to choppy. That's my new try to go. Okay, maybe not. This is a little too much for my computer, but
Oh no.
perhaps someone maybe. What have you? I was saying maybe a bit choppy, but I was trying to say, Maritza, I'll take a look at this in a second.
worries.
But first, Joe, perhaps you can go into the meetup page of
Sure.
this session.
Yep.
In the description, I put a link to you in the chat because that shows just my hands doing this thing. And perhaps for anyone who finds this particular way of trying to do it together too confusing, follow along step by step and skip back if you need to, and so forth. And I'll try if I can help you. Maritza. There's the link. That's great. Maritza, you're muted.
I think I might have fixed it. Oh, wait, can you see? Does it look good? I have one finger at the top.
That's good. Show me.
So there's one finger here.
Yes, but that is not the finger you should
No, not the right finger. What am I doing wrong?
be
I'll show it to
right
you
now.
from this way. Let me turn it around.
Yeah, the thing is that is a you see your left hand end of the line. If
You're breaking up. I can't hear what you're saying.
I'll stop my video for it.
Yeah, that's actually probably a good idea.
Sorry. So I
Can
have.
you hear me better now? Anyone? Can you hear
Yes.
more?
Yes.
Just as you did a second
Yes.
ago. Okay. Show me.
Okay, so I have
There.
four corners here. I have a
Yeah, that's okay.
second four corners here.
All of that is fine.
Okay.
It's just you've jumped into a finger that you would not want to jump into. So your left hand side of the string,
Yeah.
that one, if you could retrace it, take that back out of that last finger, and instead get your right hand side of the line and put it into, well, first just.
So now it looks like this.
Oh, yes, that's good. Now you take your right hand side, that one,
Yeah.
and you put it into where the left-hand side comes out. Okay? Now this, just to clarify this happens at sometimes, and in some cases it's actually something we want, but for simplicity's sake, it's not what we want now. So we kind
Okay.
of keep to the edge of what we're doing. Yes, perfect. That's better.
Okay.
Okay. And I saw Eleonora said on the chat that I think you should have used different, perhaps, but this is really something that is as messy and as complex or complicated as it is for the time being, but with repetition it becomes it's more clear. Once you find your way into the pattern, you know what you're looking for, and then you don't get as quickly lost. Okay, I'll try turning my video back on, and I hope I'm not breaking up on you right now. Is it okay, or am I choppy again? Am I a chopper? Chop,
No, you're
chop.
you're
Good?
fine right now.
I can hear
All
you
right,
okay
well,
now. Yes.
cool. All right, so that is perfect, Maritza. That's where we want
Okay.
to be. And I'll catch up on my second one here, just to be in the same place. So I was closing this corner there, and I'm gonna add one more finger to it. Jeannie, I hope you're fine. Are you? Probably. Unless stating otherwise. Okay, so I'm there. And now on this little bubble that I'm doing here, I do have two corners that already have 4 connections. So those are good. Those are the 2 that we've closed. And I'm looking at the finger that I'm coming out of right now. Okay. And I'm looking at the 2 corners it's pointing at. And on mine, I see that one of the corners has currently 3 fingers pointing at it. The other one has 4. Do you agree? Yes, Maritza is nodding, and so is Jeannie. Okay, so the heavier one has how many? 4. That's the number we want for the 8eyes, so that's fine. We can close that corner. And looking at it, perhaps if I explain it this way, you see between those 4 fingers, there's 3 connections drawn already with the line. And you may see that one more connection is missing. That's the one we're drawing now. Okay? So I'll put my inside string, the heavy side, through that one finger that the connection is still missing, putting that connection in. And after that, I'm again coming out of 2 beads. And coming out of 2 beads always means I need one more finger to close that gap. Okay, so on this one it looks this way. I'm coming out of, wait, I'm turning it this way, coming out of these 2 fingers, this one and that one. And when I have 2 fingers, I'm doing this, closing the gap. Where is my beads? Here.
Are you adding
Maritza,
another?
you're muted.
You're adding another
I'm-
bead, Struppi?
Yes, because I'm coming out of 2 beads or 2 fingers, and that is not a triangle yet. I need one more finger to make it a triangle, right? So I'm adding one finger to one end of the line and I'm taking the other end of the line. Okay, I'm doing that here. I have added one finger on one end of the line. I'll take the other end of the line and make ends meet, feed it in where the other line comes out. And if all things go well, as I draw on it, I'm closing another eye. Maritza, what's going on?
Nothing.
You're having fun, I hope.
Yes.
Looks like it. That's the most important bit. Yeah, yeah.
Got it.
All right.
You didn't see the first mistake.
Okay, I'll add one more bead, one more finger to the other structure that I'm growing, the one with the bead strings, bead fingers. And after that, we'll check out where we are. Okay. I'll draw that, and that's cool. There. So, if everyone is with us now, if you look, when you look at your structure that you've grown, it now looks already like an 8eyes if everything went well, because we already have all the fingers in there. Yeah? So the appearance of it is that it is already done, but it's not, because if you look closely at the two corners where you come out, you notice there's some connections still missing. Because right now we have only strung up 7 out of 8 eyes, right? So there's still those two connections next to the finger that we're coming out of missing, and we'll just follow that lead. We put in those connections, okay? So what I'm doing is, right now I'm taking my two ends of the line and each one of them goes into one adjacent bead, one adjacent finger. And then they do both come out in one corner. And usually if I'm making a, let's say, a standalone structure, this would be where I put the knot to finish it off. And then I'll thread the ends of the line again. But rather than doing that, now I would like to invite you to actually close that last loop, so that in the end we're coming out of one bead with both ends of the line. Okay? There it is. And then when I draw on it, I'm actually drawing it close. Yes, we've got a whole thing. We've got a whole 8eyes now. And our umbilical cord is still coming out of it. And what I do is I'll just tie a knot in the end of the line here. I'll tie the two ends of the line together so that I have a long loop that comes out of the 8eyes. Why? Well, because now my 8eyes is a little container, because I can open it, wiggle it open, put something into it, and then draw it close. And whatever I put in won't come out, right? And particularly, I'm going to do it with the small one here, that still has those connections missing, because we've only got one spherical bead for every one of the fingers on this tiny thing. I earlier said something about it being a sub-frequency. And that I spoke of a kind of duality, and I've done a video on that where I go into more detail on that. But it turns out that this thing here, this 8eyes that I've grown, actually looks like a dozen beads, a dozen spheres. And currently it's a dozen around none. So if I push on it, it's actually going to transform a bit. Now what I do, because I have enough beads, is I open this one again, just without taking the string out, just opening up that last eye, and I'll put one more bead into it. Oop. And then I close it. And what I have now is a dozen around one, which is the spherical configuration of what is also known as the vector equilibrium, or as I would call it, the 2-8eyes. Now, this is not really in a vector equilibrium as such, but it is the closest drawn spheres of that. It's a dozen around one sphere. And if right now this is like a little talisman, I can make my tie a knot here in the end of the line, and then I have basically like a necklace with that little bead in it as a little treasure that if I want to, I can take it out of that or put it back in, right? Like so. And this little one, if instead of that necklace model where I can open it and close it, I actually did do a knot in the corner, it's another option, then this would make a beautiful spinning top. Perfect spinning top. So that's something I invite you to do if you'd like to. Right now, again, I think it's a beautiful thing just to have this as a piece of jewelry where you can actually add something into it and then have it in there and have it safe. And perhaps now it's a good place, Maritza, if we show these two next to one another, we can compare them, right? Because we've done the exact same thing. It's the same structure. It just looks very different because on mine, the corners look very big. Here, what seems to be a square. Whereas on yours, they seem smaller because the eyes are bigger, right? Where my triangles here don't even almost look like an eye. Like it's a tiny little eye between 3 beads. In your case, it's a much bigger eye, right? And if you instead were to take 3 beads for every finger, then it would be even more clear. It would increase the resolution, so to speak, make it more well-defined as an 8eyes, right? But this shows a kind of duality that we can make out. And I've come now to call this the finger frequency, right? I've been perhaps speaking before of this. For instance, this is an example of a 4eyes, right? The overall structure here is a 4eyes. And I would call this a 3-frequency 4eyes because around the edges, this edge, there's 1, 2, 3 fingers, right? So 3 fingers are 3 intervals between 1, 2, 3, 4 spheres that are here. That's the frequency of the structure as such. But if I look at any one of the fingers here, this one, there's 3 beats for that one finger with 2 intervals. So this is if we call this the finger frequency of this is 2. On yours, you have a finger frequency of 1 because you have 1 interval between the 2 spheres that make 1 finger. And then this one that I've done here has a finger frequency of 0, because there is no interval between the two spheres. It's just one sphere. And this kind of 0 state allows to create this, right? So it is an 8eyes, but it doesn't look like one because it's like a sub-frequency thing. And there is a duality there at play that is super profound and deep, and you won't find anyone else speaking about it, I think. And if you do, please let me know, because I haven't heard anyone else yet notice it. But I think this is a very, very profound kind of thing, as silly as it seems, because it's just string and beat, right? But for instance, this, I've shown this one earlier around here. This is the same structure that we've grown. It's an 8eyes, but now you can look at it and see the finger has 4 beats. So there's 3 intervals. So it's a 3 frequency finger, or 3, no, the fifth, sorry, still trying to make this make sense. The finger frequency of this 8eyes is 3. Yours is 1. The one that I've grown here is 0. But that only applies to those structures where we are using spherical beats to make up the fingers. Because you've noticed the one that I've done here, it's also, if you like, it's a 0 frequency finger. But because the thing itself is a long finger, it still is an 8eyes, and just an 8eyes, right? We wouldn't mistake this for a dozen around none. Okay, but that's, you know, additional further stuff. The important thing is we've now grown, everyone, I hope, has grown their 8eyes. And if you have, I've only seen Maritza and Jeannie has disappeared, I don't know. But if anyone else has done one, please go ahead and share. And if not, even just if you have anything to share, just go ahead and let us know, because I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Folks, go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat for anybody that wishes to share their experience or even their thoughts. Okay, so I'll just make a quick comment. I mean,
Sure.
by watching this process actually unfold, I have a better idea of what like actually tuning in actually means. So with the idea of looking at the frequencies, is like you're going through the process of actually creating something so that you can actually understand like what it means to create the structure, but then to what's the relationship between them. And just going through that has been able to, I can see some of the images like in Synergetics now that actually make a little bit more sense to me. Just watching you just do these videos.
That's cool. I think Brian has
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
put up an exclamation mark.
Yeah, hi everybody. I have been watching all the way along and getting somewhat confused. My hands and fingers have all tied themselves in a knot, although I don't have any beads or string to show anything from it. It looks a very fascinating process, one I'm sure which I will not be able to follow. But I'm going to take the recording as well. I'm going to try and get some beads, which I have difficulty getting where I live. And I'm going to give it a go. I can't say more than that. Thank you, Struppi. It was a really pleasant, 3 hours, 4 hours, but it was very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, so much for me stating arrogantly that it would only take half an hour or so. but that's, that's fine. If I had said beforehand how long it would really have taken, no one would have engaged. But now you can perhaps look at this, for instance. This is a 3-frequency 8eyes. It's the whole structure. It's not just the membrane. The entire thing is here. The entire network, all the insides of it. And you can tell that the finger frequency of this is 3. So every single finger in there has 4 beats. Now you can perhaps appreciate the time that it took to grow this. And you can perhaps understand that I thought I had it done. I finished the last connection and I was like, yeah, nice. And then I turned it over and I saw, oh shit, there's a connection missing. And then, usually when I do these, they are really just a single line running through through the whole thing, and never more than necessary. So all the passes are just the one that is necessary. And if I run out of string, I add more string. But on this one, I actually cheated, because not only had I missed one connection, but it turned out I missed 2. So I just took 2 more strings and went through those. And no one would ever know if I hadn't told you. But I can promise you that no one will probably find out which connections those are, because I wouldn't probably be able to make them out again. But this is just as an example of where this leads, or where this can be taken, right? Because there is no end to the level of complexity that we can arrive at with this technique, while being like a base layer simplicity wise. Like the technique itself is as free to move and to breathe and to be as is anything. Nothing in here is set in stone. All the shape is just the synergy of the whole thing, right? No one in here is forced to be in that place. They're all doing so out of their own beingness. And I think that's a great thing to grasp and to understand, really, because this is where these kinds of techniques are so different from, for instance, using Zoom tools for creating these kind of models, right? Some people use those, some people use other things, but for instance, on a Zoom tool, I could just set up a connection so that I get a box, a cube without triangles, and it would appear to be a cube because the connections have the micro triangulation. So it's anyway, anything goes. I can make any shape, but it's not going to shapeshift. It's not going to move, right? Whereas in these structures, everything is in movement, right? And if I have an opening in there, now I don't really have one of those examples here. I have it in the other room. But if I did have one where there's a gap somewhere that isn't triangulated, then it would be moving. I could shapeshift, right? The triangles would move because of that opening. And that is something we won't find on any of the models that introduce other layers of triangulation, below the resolution that we're tuning into, like a micro triangulation of sorts. Those do not allow for these behaviors to show, right? And I think that is where this kind of necklace model, if you like, is really showing us the full breadth, the full depth of these behaviors to a degree that other modeling techniques may not actually do. But mind you, if something works with beads and string, you can rest assured that if you were to turn it into, you know, the same, you can use the same technique and use steel pipes and string them up, and you will get a structure that is working in the same way. It's just going to be a lot more strong and heavy, right? So I think Mona was it who spoke to this being scalable. That's true. The only reason why this has any given size is because of the choice of materials that we use and put together. And whether it's long as bamboo or steel pipes or whatever, or just these tiniest of beads, it's still gonna be the same essential principle at play, right? And that's where the metaphysical and the physical play a role, right? Because these principles are true, independent of the size, independent of the material that we use to embody them. However, on a technique like this, we allow the most of the principles to come out and play, because we're not putting any artificial limits on that, because we're really just using the basic principles, and those unfold and those come into being, right? Ooh,
So actually, Brian put a beautiful poem in the chat. So, yeah, so in a realm of wonder and whimsy untold, there lived a being of stories, a bard so bold. His name was Struppi, a master of his art, with a twinkle in his eye and a kindling heart. With a wave of his hand and a flick of his wrist, he wove enchantments that could not be dismissed. Words flowed from his lips like a crystal cascade, painting pictures and dreams, a magical charade.
Oh,
That is actually, that is beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful, right?
Wonderful. That's another kind of eighteyes. Yeah.
You know, Struppi, I think, yeah, this is going to be, that was fantastic. You know, and I think this is going to be a really important series. Maritza, do you have any comments that you wish to make?
I have to say, I mean, this was so enjoyable. I feel like I am less tired than when I first started tonight. So
yes.
this is exciting.
Synergy.
Yes, it's so, and the best part is that having attempted this before I was here with your tutelage, it helps to kind of snap some things in place, because now I see where I was going wrong. So that's super exciting. And also the it just makes it's funny, almost like you go, oh, that's what seeing it, it's so true that like seeing it just helps you in different things. And I can see in each one of these, I can see that little triangles. When I remember that mine, it's two of them is one finger. Really cool. If I may, I know like we've been here forever, but if I can ask one slight tangent question. If I were using straw,
yeah,
do I do the same feed through method?
Yeah.
It's the same? Like,
It's
so
the
is
same.
straw the finger?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I treat the straw as the finger, and then I would loop it around that way. Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, but I would not, probably I wouldn't advise to use like 2 straws for 1 finger.
Right, they're too long.
Yes, that's exactly it, because the reason why it works with the spherical beads is because of their shape, right? Because they are, they have this beautiful property that they allow for all kinds of angles of interplay, of interaction. Now, if we were to do the same thing and take, for instance, when I order these beads, I order thousands of them at a time, and they still run out in no time at all. So last time I ordered them, the shop sent a little gift and a little bag with these beads that were cubes, you know, and I took them and I turned them into an eighteyes. And it's the most awkward looking thing because they are so not happy to be in that place, right?
No.
And it's those moments where they meet mostly because they can't meet in the way that they would want to because of the shape that they are making all together, because of their individual shapes, right? They are at odds with the thing, and they just don't get together in this way. Where with the spherical beads, they accommodate all kinds of interaction, all kinds of coming together. And then with that, and really, maybe I'll leave you with this. I would love you all, if you choose to, and if you have enough supplies, to just do the same thing a couple more times with different numbers of spheres for every finger. So you get a little set of them and can see how they look and behave differently. Because, for instance, on this one, the eyes are way bigger than the corners. But this is also, you know, I can push this and then it's like this, for instance, you know, it's not as clear in its shape, because the more beats, the more degrees of freedom to move. And other than that, I mean, whatever we do next time around, I'm open for anything, but also please feel invited to take this and see what happens if you do the same pattern, but you only do 3 fingers for every corner. You will get a 4eyes. Then take 5 fingers for every corner, and you will have 12 Even though you've never seen one in your life, you've never made one in your life, and you don't need to know how it's done, other than knowing that every corner that you're turning around to is done once you have 5 fingers present. And it will turn into the 12 out of its own. And that's the true magic of synergetics, I think, is that we do not need to have it all figured out beforehand. We don't need to know everything before we start going. If we just know enough of the principles to get going and not be afraid of mistaking, right? I think the only true mistake is a take not taken, is a step not taken, is a game not played because we're too afraid to mistake. That, and perhaps on the other hand, engaging in games and plays where mistaking is truly catastrophic, right? Like one of the outcomes of the energetic civilization that we have now, where everything is always turned into pieces and cut apart, we have broken the atoms, even though they were supposed not to be broken by name. We've broken them, we've done nuclear fission, and we've created atom bombs and nuclear power plants. And looking at something like Chernobyl, 3 Miles Island, or Fukushima, or other of these places, it is clear that this is a game way above our league, right? Because if we do make a mistake in that, and we all know to err is to be human, to make mistakes is to be human. So we should stay clear of games where we should not make mistakes, because the mistakes are too grave, cost too much. So that, I think, is a good advice for everyone. Whatever it is we're doing, go full in on anything where, you know, making a mistake gets us to where we need to go. Just as Evanique was saying, you know, if we do make a mistake that hurts someone, we need to apologize, because perhaps we didn't mean to, right? Some people do mean to, and they won't apologize, and they don't think they've mistaken. But tuning or zooming out of this whole thing, we notice that a lot of the things that we have engaged in, a lot of the things that have created this cacophony of catastrophes, up from climate change to mass extinction and so forth, capitalism, patriarchy, a lot of these things are only possible because they are based upon the foundational mistake of thinking that a line is a division and a membrane, a boundary, a border is divisive, separating out one from the other, right? That's why I think the deeper consequences of the Platonic kind or Euclidean or Cartesian kind of geometries and mathematics is that it gives the false, the mistaken assumption or the mistaken ground to do all of these kinds of things that are so clearly devastating to all our common being, our kinship earth, right? And for so long as we keep those modes of thinking, those frameworks in place, it is absolutely clear that capitalism will continue to wreck everything. It won't stop until there's nothing left. But we don't have to go that way, right? We know now that we have a choice, and it is down to everyone's integrity, individual and communal and societal, to choose based upon an informed understanding of the principles at play, to choose which way to go. And I would always feel drawn towards the way where I know that my mistaking is integral to my growing, my unfolding, my learning who I am and what it is that I need to be doing in the world, rather than to go down into a path where I am, I'm put into a box and fed a box where I need to tick a box that says this is the right and this is the wrong, and don't you ever take the wrong choice. And the answers are in the back of the book and all that. I stay clear of that. That's not my kind of flavor now. I rather go into this and see what is there, because if I can find all these beautiful things that I have never seen before, just think what everyone else will find out, right? Now, if you've got your job, whatever it is, and you look at what you're doing through this framework, understanding integrity comes with the structure, with the triangle. That's a good place to start. Do a mistake. Don't go back to square one.
That's right.
But a step before that to the triangle, and see where that leads you. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for that, Struppi. I mean, getting outside our boxes is actually one of the most important things. And it's often, we just actually did a meetup on outwitting the devil. Essentially, fear, when fear dictates, the fear of a mistake, can actually be catastrophic in and of itself. And that's what essentially the devil will tempt you with, essentially, is that uses fear as a tool in order to prevent you from actually being whoever you can be. So it was really it's one of the best books that we've covered here, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So anyway,
don't just get out of your box, but realize that it isn't there. Not thinking outside the box, but thinking without the box. And you will find that rather than living in fear, we're here to live in sphere. And that little S makes all the difference, because it's the S of balance and dance and reciprocity and one and other, rather than against one another.
That was poetic. Well, thank you, everyone. And just really quickly, coming up this week, we have tomorrow, Maritza will be hosting Poetry Mondays. And on Tuesday, we'll be completing the Art of War. And on this Wednesday, I believe it's Phil. I think it's the philosophy of history. That's right, it is that. And then on Thursday is Seneca's letters. And that'll be coming up over the next 4 days. So I look forward to seeing everybody soon. I appreciate everybody sticking it out. And I'm glad that Capital One was actually kind enough to lend me a room. So, so thank you, everyone. And, look forward to seeing you next month, Struppi. And
So do I.
we'll think about another structure.
Mhm.
And everybody have a good day, rest of the day.
Thanks all.
Take
Thank you,
care.
Struppi.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right.